Did we just go from Liberation Day to Liquidation Day? The worst day on the corner of Wall and Broad in nearly 5 years, but President Trump saying today that he's comfortable with where everything stands.
It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on, and it's a big thing. You'll see how it's going to turn out. Our country's going to boom.
All right, hello, good evening, welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. So, some of the tariffs are in. The new norm for now, basically, is here. Tonight, you're going to hear from the man who runs one of the biggest worldwide platforms on what it all means, from your Mother's Day gifts to Christmas, potentially beyond. Donald Trump's former chief of staff with us here as well with what the White House is going to do next. Plus, the Tren de Aragua deportations. A federal judge now seems ready to levy some sort of punishment for those outbound flights. How the administration could fight back as one of Customs and Border Protection's top advisors joins us tonight here on The Hill. But first, of course, we begin over at the White House. Our Robert Sherman, live covering the president who suggested today, Robert, he was kind of making the analogy back and forth to a patient, right?
Yeah, and we've heard that again and again here today, Blake, and it doesn't matter how the markets are responding today or what the reaction is like from around the globe. The president remaining laser focused on pressing forward with the cornerstone of his economic plan, promising Americans that tariffs in the long run will make the nation stronger than ever. This is what he said on Air Force One just moments ago.
I think it's going to all work out. Remember, there are no tariffs if you build your plant or you build your product, make your product in the U.S. And so a lot of people, there's going to be a transition period because they're going to be building instead of paying tariffs to some other place. But there are no tariffs. If you think there are no tariffs, what you have to do is make your product in the United States.
Despite the president's optimism, Wall Street uneasy today, with the Dow, S&P 500, and NASDAQ all trading deep in the red. With major trade partners like Canada and China vowing to counter the administration, well, people here at the White House have acknowledged that there could be some bumps.
We don't know what those consequences will look like. In fact, it may be months before we really know. Having said all of that, the answer is yes. We are setting up the infrastructure that if, in fact, we have some economic consequences in the short term to our farmers and perhaps our ranchers, that we will have programs in place to solve for that.
And the White House is leaving the door open for tariffs to be tweaked if countries back down or cancel their tariffs on the U.S., or if they increase tariffs on the U.S., the White House says they're prepared to up the charges even more. Blake?
All right, our Robert Sherman live tonight from the North Lawn. Robert, thank you. So this is a policy that is rivaling widespread tariffs that this country and the world really haven't seen. You got to go back to the Hoover administration, 1930s. The White House continued to give its full defense of the new transition as world leaders pushed back.
The president's actions will reverberate here in Canada and across the world.
China firmly opposes this and will take necessary measures to resolutely safeguard its legitimate interests.
Nobody wins in a trade war. That is not in our national interest.
Now, stripping away the noise for a second, we want to show you just 5 things that have already changed so far here on day one. For example, the French President Emmanuel Macron urging European companies to pause investments in the United States. The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announcing retaliatory tariffs on 25% of U.S. vehicle imports. Here at home, the immediate impacts as well in the auto industry, as 25% tariffs on foreign imports now on the books. Stellantis, that's the parent company for Chrysler, now pausing production at 2 assembly plants in Canada and Mexico, but that is resulting in some 900 layoffs for workers here in the U.S. On the brighter side, General Motors is increasing production of light-duty trucks at its Indiana assembly plant, and Ford now says it is offering employee pricing to all U.S. customers, at least here, for the next 2 months. Existing domestic manufacturers probably going to be the early winners here, right, if you're already making inside the U.S., but now companies of all kinds are trying to figure out how to play this new dynamic. The company Flexport has as good of an insight as any into how items that you use every single day get shipped all around the world that eventually make it into your home. Flexport giving these examples just today for China alone. Now, they say starting after April 9th, for example, a steel water bottle will have a 55% tariff, a sofa, 79%, a microwave, 83%, a car steel bumper, 131%. Ryan Peterson is the man I wanted to hear from, as he just briefed companies and business leaders from all across the U.S. on what to expect going forward. Ryan is the CEO of Flexport, joins us live here on the Hill. I think I could say friend of the show at this point. Ryan, thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you, man.
Of course. So you said today on your call that this is sort of like a nuclear bomb for businesses and products. What do you mean?
Oh, well, I was talking about a particular product company or a particular category, which is, if you saw that on there, if you're making furniture in China, 79% duty rate. I mean, you compare that to before Trump's first administration, it was 0%. So that is just very rough. And you know, of course, it applies equally to everybody, but some companies are making goods in Vietnam. They've got to lower it more like 46%. So they've got an advantage over you. You move to Vietnam, but 46% is still pretty ugly. And at some point, you start to get to the question: do you really need that new couch, or are you gonna, spend your money on something else? It could be really ugly for certain categories.
So you know this, Ryan, but there's a lot of smaller companies, right, in the United States, in their factories, or maybe in China or Cambodia or Vietnam, wherever. And now they're trying to figure out, okay, the tariffs have flown, right? They're getting up there high. Do I move maybe to a lower tariff country? But I believe your analysis, from having seen sort of what's going on all across the globe here, is not to necessarily do anything just yet. Is that right?
There's a lot of the math that you're seeing right now, including what we just showed you, is assuming that everything stays the same and that these new tariffs are the tariffs, and that's the go forward plan. The reality is, I think with the Trump administration, at least what we've seen in the last couple of months, is like nothing's probably permanent. I think there's definitely going to be deals to be made. The president or some of his team has alluded to that. And so I would definitely say, we're probably still in the moment of observing the world before we rush to these are long-term decisions of where you put your factory, where you do your supply sourcing, et cetera. So it's probably a little too early to make any drastic decisions. And that's part of the problem with this transition that the administration wants to drive, is like, you don't have long-term view of where it's going to be, hard to make those investments that the administration wants you to make, whether that's in the U.S. or you saw much lower tariffs in Latin America, for example. Maybe we should get that signal and go produce somewhere in South America.
So I want to show that map for a second, because I saw your post and you sort of you sort of turned me on to this concept. So you look at the map there, the dark red, right? Those are the higher tariffs, and the lighter shades are the lower tariffs. And Ryan, you're basically saying Latin America is the winner here, because it seems like the president's the higher tariffs are focused on Asia right now.
It's a nice map. We should make the U.S. have a 0%, and then you got it. But yes, I think, that seems to be the signal. It's not entirely clear if that's on purpose or this because they've done this based on their assessment of the trade imbalances, and a pretty simple math formula that they used, basically the deficit divided by the imports for each country. And so it's not that obvious that this is really a strategic. They say, hey, we want to treat Latin America as America's backyard, our strategic kind of home, hemisphere, or if it's just what fell out of the data by accident.
All right. Ryan Peterson, always great to see you and speak with you. Ryan's, again, got a view all over the globe, CEO of Flexport, with us tonight here on the Hill. We'll talk again soon. Have a good one. Thanks, Ryan. All right, with me now, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, former Budget Director, NewsNation contributor. Hello, sir.
Hello, Berman.
So I found that map to be somewhere between interesting to notable, because you see where the larger numbers are. It's over in Asia. Ryan brought up the point. I don't know if this is just math off the top or strategic. Where are you?
I'm still lost with
you're lost.
A lot of people, because I'm hearing mixed messages out of the White House. I'm hearing the president say that he's open to negotiating this on a country-to-country basis, and I hear his staff say that he's not. What you heard the Flexport guy say there is just everybody take a deep breath and wait, because we don't know enough about whether or not these tariffs will be in place.
Do you think that's wise?
Absolutely. If I'm the CEO of Ford, right? I'm sitting here and wait a second. Do I need to rush and build a new plant here in the U.S., or is Trump going to change the tariffs if he gets a good deal with Mexico or Canada or whatever?
Okay.
And if I've invested heavily in the U.S. and I go back to low tariffs on stuff in Mexico, then I'm at a competitive disadvantage. So the mixed messages out of the White House are really killing, I think, what they wanted to accomplish.
So you talked about possibly making a deal. Here was the president aboard Air Force One just a little while ago.
Well, it depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you something that's so phenomenal, as long as they're giving us something that's good, the tariffs give us great power to negotiate. Always have.
Here was Eric Trump. I wouldn't want to be the last country that tries to negotiate a trade deal with the president. The first to negotiate will win. The last will absolutely lose. I have seen this movie my entire life.
I get it, but if Zimbabwe goes first and Europe goes last, does that mean Europe doesn't get a deal? There's a disconnect in this. Again, I'm not sure everybody's on the same page down at the White House, and it may have a dramatic impact on what they want to accomplish. Again, we talked last night about whether or not they wanted to raise money with these tariffs or whether or not they're trying to encourage people to move back to the U.S. with manufacturing. You can't have it both ways. Now they're talking about, well, maybe these are going to be around long enough for companies to rely on it so they can invest here. And you're also hearing, well, but maybe they'll go away if we get a really good deal. And I just don't think folks can plan around that.
One of the definitive stories today was the stock market, right? It's the first metric of sentiment. And I want to show you a heat map or a version of it. And this sort of breaks down the sectors and breaks down the industries. And what do you notice there? A whole lot of red, right? But I want to key you in on what's known as consumer defensive in the middle there. Those are your Cokes, your Pepsis, your Costco's, right, that are in the green, essentially companies that we're still going to drink Pepsi and we're still going to go to Costco, right, and the utilities as well in the green. We know how much the president watches the stock market. He says the patient basically had the surgery and now we're onward. How much is the White House watching this tonight?
Closely. They are. Look, okay. I take them at their word, and I think they're right. They don't look at it minute by minute, and they knew they probably were going to get pounded today. I think the next couple of weeks will be interesting to see. You and I talked a little bit off air about, does this put pressure on the House and the Senate to pass the tax bill faster? Because again, what do we talk about at the very beginning? Right. The Trump initiatives writ large will be good for the economy. Tariffs will be bad, all right, in the short term at least, but tax policy, deregulatory policy will be good. I think by going first with the tariffs, it puts pressure on getting these other things done even more quickly.
Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff, NewsNation contributor. Thank you, sir.
See you in a bit.
Catch you here later in the show. All right, still to come here on the Hill. He stood side by side with the president at the White House.
We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough.
So what about those who say, you know what, this is a good thing? That right there is Brian Panbeck, a retired auto worker, the only other person yesterday to speak besides the president. He joins me live on the other side of the break. From the White House to the cornfields, the tariffs also impacting American farmers. Could a bailout of some kind be on the horizon? Anna Koyman with me as well. Plus, a showdown today over migrants deported to El Salvador. One of the top advisors to Customs and Border Protection joins us live here on the Hill. Welcome to Washington. There's a whole lot going on. This is the center of politics. I'm Blake Berman. We're back in 4 minutes here on the Hill.
This is NewsNation, ranked least biased among news channels. That's why we're America's fastest growing cable news network. Go to joinnn.com to see for yourself.
Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. The European Union bans imports of most American poultry. Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef. China charges American rice farmers an overquota, it's called.
President Trump banking on Liberation Day, as he calls it, to solve the declining economic situation for many of America's farmers. But is America's breadbasket already toast? Net farming income is expected to decline in 2024 due to lower prices and rising costs. But the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation says tariffs are not the answer, saying they will, quote, drive up costs of critical supplies, and retaliatory tariffs will make American-grown products more expensive globally. Time now for Koyman's Corner. NewsNation weekend anchor Anna Koyman, with us here on a busy news week, busy news day. Hello, Anna. So, look, there's a lot of sectors, a lot of industries, right, that are trying to digest all this. How are farmers reacting?
A lot of consternation, Blake. Tonight, American farmers, they're worried about what the tariffs are going to mean for their livelihood. So they're anxiously watching shows like yours tonight, wondering where the next chip is going to fall. Many farmers in this country depend on selling their crops overseas, as we know, and they also fork out huge sums of cash each and every single season on equipment, seeds, and fertilizers. So these tariffs are really a double-edged vulnerability sword for them, if you think about it. And a top concern is that these retaliatory tariffs from other countries will significantly harm the ability of American farmers to export corn and wheat and soybeans. And farmers are particularly troubled that China may start shopping elsewhere, places like Brazil, also places like Argentina, for example. One American farmer tells NewsNation President Trump is bargaining on the backs of the very people who helped him get elected to office.
I have not just voted for the president, but many of the farmers voted Trump for president in this country. And we're the number one persons who are taking the punch here.
So farming is risky business. Farmers go into this knowing this. Very often it's generations that go, it's not for the faint of heart. It gets passed down. But between the unpredictable weather from Mother Nature they always deal with, they've also got these rising production costs already because of inflation. And then the labor challenges that are also now, they're considering because of these mass deportations too, and the wink, wink, legal, illegal immigrants who have been helping to pick fruits and vegetables. It won't deal with that so much with these other crops we're mentioning, but it's something to think about. And margins are shrinking, Blake.
So, I mean, look, the decision's been made, right? We saw the president in the Rose Garden. The auto tariffs, for example, are already in. The others coming in the upcoming days. What does this group hope that the Trump administration will actually do going forward?
They're crossing their fingers and toes tonight that the Trump administration is going to provide some financial assistance for farmers like Trump did during his first time. You'll remember, you probably reported on it, Blake, back in 2018, the U.S. Department of Agriculture authorized up to $12 billion in programs. I'll read some of it from our screen here. Assistance to corn, cotton, dairy, hog, soybean, sorghum, and wheat producers, and $1.2 billion to unfairly targeted commodities, and some $200 million to develop foreign markets. So are the farmers going to get what they need to survive in Trump's second term? That's the big question tonight. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins says yes, they will. The Agriculture Department is getting ready to help farmers if they do need it in the near term. So farmers are reiterating tonight, Blake, that these tariffs may upend their market share around the world, potentially damaging these relationships that in some cases have taken decades or generations even to build. So the uncertainty even has some farmers going, should we invest in planting our crops this season? So very, very real. It is risky business. You bet the farm, right? That's where the saying comes from.
Yeah, you bet the farm. Yeah, that is one good way to put it. Any sort of market, they love certainty, right? So I hear what you're saying there and can understand. It was interesting, Anna, because the president said aboard Air Force One just a little while ago, talking about the concept of maybe some deals with other nations and then bringing the tariffs back down. That's my way of saying this weekend, when you're on air here on NewsNation, you might have some news. We'll see where this all goes from here. Anna Koyman, thanks so much. Catch you this weekend. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, still much more ahead. Here on the Hill tonight, Operation Deportation. Dozens of suspected Tren Aragua gang members captured in the border state of Texas. Our Allie Bradley with these images. She joins us live on the other side. And did the White House wrongly detain American father to El Salvador? The former head of Border Patrol, senior advisor to Customs and Border Protection. With me live on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill.
You're listening to The Hill on NewsNation's audio stream. Available 24/7 on the NewsNation app. Or just say, Alexa, play NewsNation.
Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, the Trump administration's immigration crackdown potentially facing another legal challenge. A federal judge hearing arguments to determine whether the White House violated court orders when it deported hundreds of migrants to an El Salvador prison. Also tonight, dozens of suspected members of the violent Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, now in U.S. custody after a major bust. Some NewsNation exclusive video that you're looking at there on your screen, along with our Allie Bradley, who's got that video along the southern border. She'll share those details in a moment. But first, to our Joe Khalil, live tonight on the latest in this court battle back and forth and where it all stands. Joe?
Yeah, Blake, so the big headline from the court hearing today is that this federal judge, James Boasberg, he seemed really skeptical of the Trump administration's case here. He says he is now exploring whether someone in the administration should be held in contempt of his court order. We will not get that answer until next week. But let's remind everybody how this all went down. Homeland Security, they sent 2 flights full of migrants who the administration says were gang members from Venezuela. Those flights went up on March 15th after 5 p.m. Now, that time is important because at 5 o'clock, this judge scheduled a hearing to examine whether these migrants on board should have legally been deported or not. Justice Department lawyers today said that they were not even aware those flights went up. Again, Judge Boasberg seemed a bit skeptical about that, given they went up minutes after his hearing was supposed to begin. He didn't think that was a coincidence. In fact, his exact quote today was the, quote, government acted in bad faith throughout the day. Boasberg seemed pretty frustrated when Justice Department lawyers couldn't tell him who in the administration gave the order not to turn those planes around when they were up in the air. Remember, Boasberg had actually ordered that they be turned around. So where all of this stands right now is he says the Trump administration still cannot and should not be deporting people solely using the Alien Enemy Act of 1798 as its legal basis to do so. Meantime, Republicans on Capitol Hill, they're exploring ways to limit judges' authorities more broadly that issue injunctions like this one. And there's a lot more related to this story. We're going to send it over to the southern border where Allie Bradley has even more developments. Allie.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So what we can tell you here is that there was an early morning operation that involved multiple agencies in Hays County that is just outside of Austin, and it led to the apprehension of 47 illegal immigrants who DHS sources say the majority have some kind of affiliation with Tren de Aragua. So we actually got some exclusive footage of that bust here, which was in Dripping Springs on Tuesday morning. And ICE tells us that of the 47 individuals that were arrested, 25 of them were men. 9 of them were single adult females, meaning they were not part of a family group. And then 4 female heads of household with 9 non-U.S. citizen children. Now, all of these individuals were determined to be here illegally. Now, in a statement, the FBI had said that it had obtained information that members of Tren de Aragua were going to be gathering. They received intel. It was something that they've been working on for quite some time. Now, neighbors actually confirm that this all happened in a neighborhood where this home is, and you can rent it for $720 a night off Booking.com. It's a $2.2 million 6-bedroom home where these individuals were apprehended. Now, this involved Hays County Sheriff, the FBI, it involved ICE, and it involved Texas DPS. They acquired a search warrant because they found enough cause to do so. And then Texas DPS actually issued that search warrant. And then again, all of these individuals, they were apprehended either near or inside of that residence. And you can see that video where they're kind of outside standing out there. But then protesters tried to block them, Blake, from coming in and out of the federal building on this transportation effort. Now, among the 47, of course, they had those people in custody, but they also seized some narcotics as well, Blake.
Hold on. Did you say a $6 million home?
No, 2.2 million,
2.2
6
million.
bedrooms.
Got it. Wow. Okay. Either way, that's a big one. Our Allie Bradley, live tonight along the southern border. Allie, thank you. Appreciate it. Joining me now, Ron Vitello, Senior Advisor for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, back with us tonight here on the Hill. Thanks for being with us, Ron.
Great to be with you.
Always nice to have you. So, starting with where Joe K was reporting on tonight, the judge in this case with the TDA flights, it seems like he's just setting up to say you guys were in the wrong. if/when that happens next week, how does that change what the administration is doing?
Well, obviously, the Justice Department, ICE, all of the elements of DHS are going to comply with whatever the court's order is. But where did this start? This started with the president declaring this group, Tren de Aragua, a terrorist organization in the United States, a foreign terrorist organization. He also a number of orders about an emergency at the border or the end of catch and release. And so these people were in custody of ICE or were found by CBP and were in custody and were removed based on the law that existed at the time.
So if I hear you when you say comply, if he rules against, does that mean we see the end of these TDA flights, these flights of suspected TDA members to El Salvador or to other nations potentially?
It's going to depend on the scope of the court, right? I'm not a lawyer, right. I'm an operator. And if you give an operator a tool to remove dangerous elements from our communities, we're going to take that advantage.
So I'm obviously operating under the if here, and as an operator, if it does move in that direction, how does that impact your operations?
Well, it just depends on how this order is scoped. If we're not using the Alien Enemies Act, there are other ways to remove people from the United States based on the president's declaration, based on current law.
These are suspected criminals, in many cases had committed crimes in their home countries. Some of these cartels and these gangs are labeled as foreign terrorist organizations. But when the public has been asked about deportations to El Salvador without due process, 61%, basically 6 in 10 oppose. Why do you think you are losing the if not the messaging battle, why do you think that is now the opinion of the American people?
Well, I'm not sure how broad that opinion is shared, right? This is what the president ran on. He talked about securing the border. He talked about making America safe again and making our community safe. This gang, Tren de Aragua, didn't exist in the United States before 2023. And so this is a big problem in a lot of places around the country. And so going after the worst of the worst and ICE being out there, taking these folks into custody, we have to do something with them. Deporting them to El Salvador seems like a pretty good idea.
It kind of stunned me when Allie Bradley talked about this massive $2.2 million house. When you saw that, you heard that, what was your...
I was also very surprised, but this is what criminal organizations do. They take advantage of maybe a sleepy neighborhood, of Airbnb, whatever it might be. But those criminal elements are amongst us. And they are declared a foreign terrorist organization, and the men and women of ICE, we're grateful for the local partners in Texas that are also helping.
The average daily encounters at the southern border is unquestionably one of the success stories of the Trump administration here in the first, whatever it is, 70 days. You're down to something like 250 encounters a day. You can see the chart there, the numbers around there. You're never going to get to zero, right? That's the reality. But you're extremely low. It's a 95% drop. So how much lower do you think you can actually go?
Well, the goal is to have complete situational awareness on the border, right? Okay. This has never been resourced before.
Situational awareness or operational control?
Both. So situational awareness gets you to 100% operational control, and so that's a zero sum. But if you light up the border, you eliminate the pathways, you have the right kind of tech, the right kind of agents, and the right infrastructure at the border, give those agents the advantage, the tools that they have to encounter people in real time, and then send them back. And when they apprehend them, there's no got-away. So 100% operational control means nobody gets away. 100% situational awareness means we know exactly what's happening on our border.
Let me leave you with this. We had Don Buckingham, who's the Texas Land Commissioner, on the show earlier this week. There's a couple islands, I guess for lack of a better term, kind of, in the Rio Grande in which she, as the Land Commissioner, is basically saying the cartels are in control. Here's what she told me. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
We just wanted to let them know, hey, we've got these islands declared. They are, in fact, the United States. It is time to get these cartels off of them and get complete operational control of our border.
Explain to me here, if this is U.S. land or Texas land, clearly not land from Mexico, how the cartels have a hold of it or had a hold of it.
Well, it's kind of like a no-go zone, right? It's a place where we have our boots on the ground on our side of the border. Sometimes people will evade apprehension by sitting on the island. Without the right kind of cooperation with Mexico or the state of Texas, it's difficult for our agents to access that area. But with our partners in the region, the 10,000 National Guard troops that are there from Mexico, our own military heroes on the border alongside Border Patrol agents. With the cooperation of the state of Texas, we can go and take that land back. In fact, Texas has eradicated some of the hidey holes, the carrizo cane, the vegetation that people hide in. And so it's an operational challenge, but not one that's insurmountable when you have the kind of help we're having and we're seeing every day.
Ron Vitello, Senior Advisor, CBP. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Always nice to see you.
Appreciate it.
Talk to you again soon. All right, still to come. Here on the Hill, The president called it Liberation Day. Chances are, some of it might be in your own home. Watch.
All right, what about dog treats? I actually had to look closely to find the label on these. These are made in Canada. My dogs love them, but 25% tariff.
Look at Brian Enton's dog, right? But seriously, what about what is in your home right now with the tariffs? Brian Enton walking us through it on the other side of the break when The Hill returns.
Chris, I enjoy your show. While we may agree or disagree, we're never disagreeable, and I appreciate your points.
This is the place that respects all Americans.
Congressman, we're always welcome here.
News Nation, news for all Americans.
I'm Blake Berman, and you're listening to News Nation, news for all America. To find News Nation on your screen, go to joinnn.com. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. So you and I both know this, right? We can go through our closets, our living rooms, whatever. Find a product from outside of our borders. But have you actually, given all the talk of tariffs and how much prices may or may not increase, have you actually checked the label, seen where they're all from? Our Brian Enton did.
Okay, I'm in the kitchen. Some things you might not expect here. Sponges, a lot of them are made in China. That would be a 34% tariff. Dawn dish soap, you're safe there, made in Cincinnati. Coffee, a lot of it comes from Colombia, 10% tariff. And this coffee maker I love happens to be from the Netherlands, 20% tariff. About the refrigerator, this one's a Samsung. You look inside, you can find the label to see where it's made. This one's made in South Korea, so that's a 25% tariff. All right, what about dog treats? I actually had to look closely to find the label on these. These are made in Canada. My dogs love them, but 25% tariff.
President Trump, by the way, acknowledging today that there is going to be some short-term pain for as fun as it is to watch Brian do that. But the president says the move puts the U.S. economy on better footing for the long term.
It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on, and it's a big thing. You'll see how it's going to turn out. Our country's going to boom.
Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, News Nation contributor, former chief of staff in the first Trump administration. Hannah Brandt, Washington correspondent. Kelly Meyer, News Nation White House correspondent. And Brad Howard, Democratic strategist. Before we start, could we give it up to Kelly Meyer for a second?
Oh.
She was at the White House this morning pulling the morning shift, and here she is at 6:45 at night with us.
She doesn't even look tired. I'm glad to be back with you guys. This is fun.
Where's Trump going here with this? You and I have been talking about this a little. You're still sort of TBD, and you were his chief of staff, so you've got a better sense of anyone, and you don't even know.
They're hoping that it's not as bad as everybody fears, and they're also hoping that they get some of the good stuff, the deregulatory agenda through and the tax policies through faster than they otherwise would. Because if things go bad, there's going to be a political bloodbath. It was Rand Paul yesterday who said, look, the last time we tried this, we were out of majority for 60 years. And
so what's the window here, right? Because we started off with the new Trump term, you saying basically you get like 6 to 8 months to just be like, all right, it was the other guy. What's the window now?
Summertime, when people go on vacation and they actually want to go out and do stuff and buy stuff. And if they can't take a summer vacation because things are too expensive, the Republicans are going to pay a political price.
They're calling it Liberation Day. I'm calling it Inflation Day. This is going to lead to dramatic price increases around the country. I think most presidents, especially new presidents, get a buffer because I think Americans realize the economy is a complicated beast, and it's not fair to give anyone full credit or full blame. This is different. There's a kinetic action now that voters can point to as why their prices are higher.
You point to this as Inflation Day. I just heard the former chief of staff say, I'm not really sure where this is going. I reported from the White House in the first term when inflation never got above 2.5%. I know it's a different trade, but let me just lay it out.
Yeah.
Inflation never got above 2.5%. He did enact a trade war with China. This is across the globe. And they would say the economy, GDP was fine, inflation was fine, everything was good.
They're conceding this point that inflation is going to get worse for a while. They are admitting prices are going to go up. They're hoping the other things bring them down. But like in the meantime, the people that are suffering are not these other countries. They are our hardworking Americans, our farmers, et cetera. So it's a big gamble.
What are you hearing over there?
I was just going to say, it's just like what we were talking about the other day in the White House briefing, where they're saying it's going to be on foreign countries, and then we ask, okay, well then why did the president tell the automakers to not raise prices? And they didn't answer that question. So the White House, we just heard the president saying that this is like an operation. A patient is recovering.
Right.
He's going to get stronger. However, he's kind of the cryptic way he's talking about this, either from Truth Social to AF1. And then I also saw Eric Trump's tweet, and we were just talking about this. I know you guys were talking about it, the negotiating, saying, I've seen this movie before. If you are the first at the table wins, the last. Exactly. So is this just really a negotiating tactic for the president?
You've been talking to folks up on the Hill. Before we get into that, I want to play Senator Kennedy from earlier today to watch.
Oh, no.
Always good TV.
So all these prognostications, they're just wags. They're wild-ass guesses, and we're going to have to wait and see. I think if it hurts our economy, or if it helps our economy, I'd like to see the president double down. But if it hurts our economy, I think you'll see him recalibrate.
What are you hearing up there?
Yeah, so obviously Senator Kennedy, a Republican, even he's a little bit concerned. But from Democrats, remember how we've talked about how Democrats have been a bit inconsistent in their responses to the president? On this, they're all on the same page. They're all saying tariffs are really bad, and they seem energized and galvanized by this issue coming together in opposition to it. I spoke with Senator Tim Kaine earlier today, and he was really excited that his resolution from yesterday passed with a couple of Republican votes. Now, that's not going anywhere, but it was a resolution to oppose the tariffs on Canada, and he sees that as a show that even some Republicans are against this.
I got a text from a Democrat today that was like, we're all sorts of fired up right now. Do you feel like you have like a little pep in your
Here's
step?
the issue. Tariffs are traditionally politically have fallen in regional issues. So Southerners, traditionally agricultural economy, have opposed tariffs, and Northerners have traditionally supported them because they're manufacturing and more union jobs. Because the Democratic Party has shifted its geographic proximity to suburban areas, the issue is mixed. And so what's galvanizing here is that we see an opportunity that Trump is going to have to bear the brunt of the economic pain he's causing on Americans, that Democrats can take a position here to criticize him. They don't have to worry about their base here, and it's going to work.
It's still fascinating to me to see how quickly the parties can change. Yes. In the Congress in 2011, the Republicans were the free traders, and the Democrats voted against every free trade bill they could.
Well, Mister, I started the House Freedom Caucus. I can now reasonably ask you: are you the party of tariffs? Right?
Apparently we are. I mean,
this is just a big exclamation point for Bill Clinton and his vision of the Democratic Party in the 90s.
I went today to look at Michigan. Okay, can we show that graphic real quick? So this is
Lake in Michigan, always Michigan.
This is the state of Michigan, manufacturing. Okay, it was 900,000 jobs at the start of the century in 2000. You go all the way to the end of the right of this. Basically, you go all the way to the right of the screen. You're at 600,000 manufacturing jobs in the state of Michigan, Kelly. Yeah. And that's the president, part of it. That's part of the president's argument.
I mean, and you're also seeing what we saw, the Stellantis cuts today with auto manufacturing. You're talking about, the cuts to the auto industry, specifically the 25% tariff going into effect. These are industries and people and workers that put him into this office. And there's going to be a lot of questions for him in these states.
And I will point out, too, Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican, introduced legislation to claw back some of the congressional power over tariffs. Yeah. So he's saying maybe we shouldn't have the president unilaterally making these decisions.
And if you're looking at where the electoral trends are going, the population shifts are moving to southern states like Florida and Texas, which don't have manufacturing bases. They tend to be more free tradists. Is this a good long-term bet for the president?
Mick, I want to ask you, can we pop that graphic back up and I'll leave you with this with Mick. Because in 2000, you had the dot-com crash and a recession, right? Yeah. In 2008, you had the great financial crisis. Yep. And then you can obviously see COVID. Yeah. Anytime that there was a recession, and I'm not saying, Mick, that there is going to be one, but anytime that there was a downturn, manufacturing went down. And that's sort of the hard part here is he's saying, the president saying, there is going to be some short-term pain, but manufacturing is going to go up, and that chart would suggest otherwise.
And again, what have we said yesterday? We say it today. My guess is we'll say it again tomorrow. They can't have it both ways. They're trying to tell you the tariffs will raise money and create jobs. They're trying to tell you the tariffs will be permanent and you can count on them. And then they're also telling you we'll negotiate, maybe they won't. There'll be another message tomorrow.
Very good chance the Commerce Secretary may not be the Commerce Secretary in 6 months.
We'll see where that goes. What time are you waking up tomorrow to be at the White House?
3 a.m.
There we go. Let's get Kelly Meyer out of here. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate
Thanks,
it. Guys. Still to come on the other side of the break. My take Lots of talk about the stock market today, but some wise words from a wise man, and it's not me, but I'll connect it when the Hill returns. And in just a minute, Hannah Doba in for Elizabeth Vargas. She'll talk with the tornado chaser as Americans face another night of deadly storms. That's in a few minutes here on News Nation. My take, other side of the break.
I'm Ashley Banfield, and you're listening to America's fastest growing cable news network, News Nation. News for all America.
One of the only regrets of my 33-year career in film and television is not making more of my films here in Texas.
All right. Starring in the Texas Senate, two faces you don't ordinarily see. The actors Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson both taking a break from filming a comedy miniseries nearby to vouch for a bill aiming to boost film incentives in their home state. That bill would bring more film projects to Texas, double funding to some $500 million. Time for my take now, as we are hearing reaction from boardrooms to analysts and beyond about what the tariffs could mean today, this year, and maybe even the next decade. A brutal day for the stock market today, for example, which is one of the immediate metrics to gauge sentiment. Now, fewer, if any, have been as successful over the last half century in the stock market than Warren Buffett. And I was reminded today of a message that he has delivered for years now. For example, here he was back in 2017.
We've got the secret sauce, and it doesn't work all the time perfectly, but you just look at where we go milestone after milestone, and never bet against America.
Never bet against America, he says. Buffett, by the way, has long invested in American companies like Coca-Cola and American Express. He's sitting on more than $300 billion in cash right now, perhaps ready to pounce. Or maybe there's another reasoning, who knows? What we do know is that the future of this new trade war is unknown. But as the Oracle of Omaha has repeated time and again, never bet against America. And that's my take. We thank you for watching us tonight here on The Hill. We'll be back tomorrow.